Earlier today, the Home Secretary confirmed that the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre has increased the threat level in the United Kingdom from substantial to severe. This is the first time in 3 years that the threat to our country has been at this level. My first priority as Prime Minister is to make sure we do everything possible to keep our people safe. Today I want to set out the scale and nature of the threat we face and the comprehensive approach that we are taking to combat it. We've all been shocked and sickened by the barbaric murder of American journalist James Foley, and by the voice of what increasingly seems to have been a British terrorist recorded on that video. It was clear evidence, not that any more was needed, that this is not some foreign conflict thousands of miles from home that we can hope to ignore. The ambition to create an extremist caliphate in the heart of Iraq and Syria is a threat to our own security here in the UK. And that is in addition to the many other Al-Qaeda-inspired terrorist groups that exist in that region. The first ISIL-inspired terrorist acts on the continent of Europe have already taken place. We now believe that at least 500 people have travelled from Britain to fight in Syria and potentially Iraq. Let's be clear about the source of the threat that we face. The terrorist threat was not created by the Iraq War 10 years ago. It existed even before the horrific attacks on 9/11, themselves some time before the Iraq War. This threat cannot be solved simply by dealing with the perceived grievances over Western foreign policy, nor can it be dealt with by addressing poverty, dictatorship, or instability in the region, as important as these things are. The root cause of this threat to our security is quite clear. It is a poisonous ideology of Islamist extremism that is condemned by all faiths and by all faith leaders. It believes in using the most brutal forms of terrorism to force people to accept a warped worldview and to live in an almost medieval state. A state in which its own citizens would suffer unimaginable brutality, including barbaric beheadings of those who refuse to convert to their warped version of Islam, the enslavement and raping of women, and the widespread slaughter of Muslims by fellow Muslims, and, of course, the exporting of terrorism abroad. So this is about a battle between Islam on the one hand and extremists who want to abuse Islam on the other. It is absolutely vital that we make this distinction between religion and political ideology. Islam is a religion observed peacefully and devoutly by over 1 billion people. It is a source of spiritual guidance which daily inspires millions to countless acts of kindness. Islamist extremism is a poisonous political ideology supported by a minority. These extremists, often funded by fanatics living comfortably far away from the battlefields, pervert the Islamic faith as a way of justifying their warped and barbaric ideology. Now, this is not a new problem. We have seen this extremism before here in our own country. We saw it with the sickening murder of Lee Rigby, and we saw it too with the homegrown 7/7 bombers who blew up tube trains and buses. The links between what happens overseas and what happens here has also always been there. Many of those who sought to do us harm in the past have been foreign nationals living in Britain, or even British citizens who returned from terrorist training camps in Pakistan or elsewhere around the world. But what we're facing in Iraq now with ISIL is a greater and deeper threat to our security than we have known before. In Afghanistan, the Taliban were prepared to play host to Al-Qaeda, a terrorist organization. With ISIL, we are facing a terrorist organization not being hosted in a country, but actually seeking to establish and then violently expand its own terrorist state. And with designs on expanding Jordan and Lebanon right up to the Turkish border, we could be facing a terrorist state on the shores of the Mediterranean and bordering a NATO member. Now, we cannot appease this ideology. We have to confront it at home and abroad. To do this, we need a tough, intelligent, patient, and comprehensive approach to defeat the terrorist threat at its source. Tough in that we need a firm security response, whether that is action to go after the terrorists, international cooperation on intelligence, and counter-terrorism or uncompromising measures against terrorists here at home. But it also must be an intelligent political response. We must use all the resources we have at our disposal: aid, diplomacy, political influence, and our military. Learning the lessons from the past doesn't mean that there isn't a place for our military. The military were vital in driving al-Qaeda from Afghanistan, and we support the US airstrikes against ISIL in Iraq. The key point is that military force is just one element of what we can do, and we need a much wider approach, working with neighbours in the region and addressing not just security, but politics too. We know that terrorist organisations thrive where there's political instability and weak or dysfunctional political institutions. So we must support the building blocks of democracy, the rule of law, the independence of the judiciary, the rights of minorities, free media, free association, a proper place in society for the army. And we must show perseverance. Not just because these building blocks take time to put in place, but because we are in the middle of a generational struggle against a poisonous and extremist ideology that I believe will be fighting for years and probably decades. We will always take whatever action is necessary to keep the British people safe here at home. Britain has some of the finest and most effective security and intelligence services anywhere in the world. We will always act with urgency where needed, as we did with the emergency data retention legislation, which is already yielding results. And we've already taken a whole range of measures to keep our people safe. We are stopping suspects from travelling by seizing passports. We're barring foreign nationals from re-entering the UK. We're depriving people of citizenship, and we are legislating so we can prosecute people for all terrorist activity, even where that activity takes place overseas. We've also stepped up our operational response. Since last year, we've seen a 5-fold increase in Syria-related arrests. We've seen port stops and cash seizures grow by over 50%. We've taken down 28,000 pieces of extremist material off the internet this year alone, including 46 ISIL-related videos. We've made clear that those who carry ISIL flags or seek to recruit to ISIL will be arrested and their materials seized. And we've seen a 58% increase in referrals to our de-radicalisation programme, called the Channel Project. Now, people are rightly concerned about so-called foreign fighters who've travelled from Britain to Syria and Iraq, taken part in terrorist acts, and now come back to threaten our security here at home. And the scale of this threat is growing. I said very clearly last week that there will be no knee-jerk reactions. We will respond calmly and with purpose, and we'll do so driven by the evidence and the importance of maintaining the liberty that is the hallmark of the society that we defend. But we have to listen carefully to the security and intelligence officers who do so much every day to keep us safe. I chaired a meeting a week ago with our intelligence and security services, and we agreed that the answer to this threat was not to dream up some sweeping new power that would be ineffective in practice. But it is becoming clear that there are some gaps in our armoury, and we need to strengthen them. We need to do more to stop people travelling, to stop those who do go from returning, and to deal decisively with those who are already here. I'll be making a statement in the House of Commons on Monday. This will include further steps to stop people travelling with new legislation that will make it easier to take people's passports away. Now, as well as being tough, patient and intelligent, we also need to take a comprehensive approach. Dealing with this threat is not just about new powers, it is about how we combat extremism in all its forms. We need to tackle that ideology of Islamist extremism head-on, at root, before it takes the form of violence and terror. That means challenging the thinking of extremist ideologues, identifying the groups in this country that push an extremist agenda, and countering them by empowering the overwhelming majority who believe in British values of democracy, the rule of law, and respect for minorities. That is why, as Prime Minister, I have driven a new approach to tackling radicalisation and counter-extremism in Britain, focusing on all types of extremism, not just violent extremism. I set this out in my Munich speech in 2011, and I've driven this forward through my extremism task force. This has included stopping the funding of organisations that promote extremism, banning hate preachers, and ensuring that every part of government and the state, from schools and universities to prisons, are all focused on beating the scourge of extremism. And this task force will continue to meet regularly. Britain is an open, tolerant and free nation. We are a country that backs people in every community who want to work hard, make a contribution and build a life for themselves and their families. But we cannot stand by and allow our openness to be confused with the tolerance of extremism. or one that encourages different cultures to live separate lives and allows people to behave in ways that run completely counter to our values. Adhering to British values is not an option or a choice. It is a duty for those who live in these islands. And in the end, it is only by standing up for these values that we will defeat this extremism, protect our way of life, and keep all our people safe. Thank you. Very happy to take some questions from the broadcasters and then one or two from the print media. Let's start with Faisal.
Faisal Islam, Sky News. Prime Minister, do you feel that this increase in the threat level changes the equation at all as regards combat or military response? And a year on from the Syria vote, do you reflect, as some of your own MPs have done, that that vote could have ended up, in fact, helping the very people who you just say pose a severe threat?
Well, let me answer that as comprehensively as I can. I mean, first of all, the change in the threat level is that is determined by the Joint Terrorism Assessment Centre. It's done independently of government, both the substance of their decision and the timing of when they make their announcements. And I understand and I agree with the assessment that they've made, that there is a greater threat that we face from Syria and Iraq, that there's a greater problem of returning foreign fighters, and also it is worth remembering, as I said in my statement, you're dealing not just with ISIL, you're also dealing with other Al-Qaeda-linked franchises in Syria and indeed potentially in Iraq. So that's the reason for the threat level change. I think that what it should trigger, first of all, is a comprehensive assessment domestically. That is the prism through which I look at these problems. My first priority is, are we safe here at home in the UK? What more can we do? And I think that's the prism through which we should look at it first of all, as my statement sets out. In terms of what we're doing with others to deal with the problem at source, we have been focused on humanitarian aid drops, where we played a very leading role. We've been focused on intelligence gathering and working with our partners to help with the work that they are doing. And the Americans have taken the lead on the rather more kinetic action in terms of airstrikes against ISIL. That has been the situation, and I think that is the right approach to take. But be clear, I will always do what I believe is necessary to keep the British people safe. That is the way I make these judgments about what we should do. In terms of linking back to the Syria vote, I wouldn't over-analyse that. The Syria vote in the House of Commons was about a proposal to take limited military action in response to the use of chemical weapons in Syria. The House of Commons made the determination that it made. Actually, there has been since then a quite widespread dislocation of Syria's chemical weapons, and a lot of those have been removed. That work needs to be completed. So I wouldn't overanalyze a connection between that vote, which was about chemical weapons, and what we face today, which is a terrorist state in the heart of Iraq. Nick Robinson.
Thank you very much. Nick Robinson, BBC News. Prime Minister, can you tell us what the higher threat level is likely to mean for people going about their ordinary lives? Will they see more armed police on the streets, at airports, in public buildings and so on? And can I follow up Faisal's question? You are saying the threat comes from abroad, that it comes from Syria and Iraq, and yet you appear to be saying there will be no British military action against ISIL forces in that region. If not, why not?
Okay, well, first of all, what does this threat level mean? I mean, let's be absolutely clear about the terms that the Joint Terrorism Assessment Centre uses. We were under a threat level of substantial, which is an attack being a strong possibility. They have moved that to severe, which is an attack being highly likely. That is a stage back from the most intense threat level, which is critical, which is when an attack is expected imminently. What this means for the British people is, first of all, I would say we should all continue to go about our daily lives in our normal way. Britain has faced terrorist threats before and overcome them. We always show resolve and perseverance, and that is exactly what we should do on this occasion. The purpose of moving the threat level is that it does trigger a series of actions by the police and indeed by others in other parts of life to make sure they put in place all the extra security that they can. So you might see some changes in terms of policing and the numbers of armed police and things like that. But that is the point of having a set of threat levels, independently judged, independently announced, is so that the authorities, both in the private and public sectors, know the level of threat that we face. Taking your second question, you say this threat comes from Iraq and Syria. And of course, the threat we face today, a part of the threat we face today, a large part, does come from Iraq and Syria. But my argument is actually we need to go a bit deeper than that. The threat we face today comes from the poisonous narrative of Islamist extremism. Wherever there is a broken state, wherever there is a civil war, wherever there is grievance, wherever there's ungoverned space, you see the Islamist extremist agenda being pushed further and faster. That is why we have problems in Somalia, why we have problems in parts of Nigeria, Mali, and indeed Syria, Iraq. The source of the problem is the extremism, and that is why I think the right approach to this is to identify the problem you face, the poisonous Islamist extremist narrative, and then you have to take it on everywhere, it appears, including at home. And when you take it on at home, that is not just about targeting those that want to do violence, but those who put forward the extremist narrative, which provides a background for recruiting people into this violence. And that is, as I say, that is the approach very much that we take. Now, do we need, with allies, to make sure that ISIL cannot succeed in Iraq and Syria? Yes, of course we do. But we should be very clear about the cause of what has brought this about. One of the principal causes of what has brought this about is the ungoverned space in Iraq, caused by the fact that for too long Iraq had a government that was not governing on behalf of the whole country. Indeed, it was only governing on behalf of one part of the country. So our strategy for combating ISIL has to have, as I've said, every single one of those functions that I outlined. We should be working with the Kurds, and we are, helping to make sure they have the arms they need. We should be helping our allies, the Americans, with the intelligence gathering that they want. We should be working to ensure an Iraqi government that can govern for all the people of Iraq, and we are. We should be playing our role in delivering aid supplies to those desperately in need. All of the time while we do that, recognizing that even if you solve the problems of ISIL and Iraq and Syria, you still have a problem of poisonous Islamist extremism. And you see that problem in our country even before that problem came about. Identifying and correctly dealing with the source of this problem is going to be absolutely key. Romilly.
Romilly with ITV News. Prime Minister, we have known about the threat of returning foreign fighters for some time. Why has it taken all summer to raise the threat level?
Well, that is a question for the Joint Terrorism Assessment Centre and not for me, but I'm very satisfied that they look at this in a comprehensive, independent and rigorous way. And they base their judgments on all of the intelligence that they see and all of the assessments that they make. And clearly, as you say, we've had a problem of ISIL in Iraq, we've had a problem of foreign fighters travelling from Britain to Iraq, and indeed we've had the problem, as I've said, not just of ISIL but also other Al-Qaeda franchises in that area. But clearly JTAC's view, Joint Terrorism Centre's view, is that that problem has become more intense, has become more serious, and that is why it's right to lift from substantial to severe. It's their decision, it's their assessment. I think it's very important politicians don't make this assessment and that it's independently made and given, and then we have the responsibility, working with all the agencies, whether that is intelligence, security agencies, police, British Transport Police, aviation, all the rest of it. How do we make sure we put everything in place to try and keep our country safe? That is how the system works. Let's take, I think we've got Sam Coates from The Times.
Prime Minister, is the decision to raise the threat level in response to a specific threat, and is there any evidence at all that any part of the ISIL organisation would actually want to target the UK? Is there anything to suggest that? And it's been a difficult couple of days for you after the events of Douglas Carswell's defection yesterday. There is, it would appear, growing unrest in your party over Europe, and Ian Duncan-Smith last night called on you to step up the gas. Do you agree with him? Can you reassure your party that you will not be campaigning to stay in the European Union, come what may? And there's particular unrest over migration, given yesterday's horrible figures. Can you do anything to reassure those who want more action on borders?
Okay. First of all, in terms of the way the Joint Terrorism Assessment Centre works and its judgment of the threat level, it looks at all of the intelligence that is available before making that judgment. And of course, we have a comment on individual specific threats, but that's the way they work. And I'm satisfied that they've looked at this very rigorously, and they've been looking at the number of foreign fighters, they've been looking at the ISIL threat and the other threats from the region, and their judgment is that this is sufficiently serious to raise the threat level. In terms of targeting the UK, there's no doubt in my mind that ISIL is targeting all of us in Europe. There's no doubt about that. We've already seen, perhaps people didn't focus on it sufficiently, the attack in the Jewish Museum in Brussels, was perhaps the clearest indication that this is an organisation that wants to kill entirely innocent people in other parts of the world in pursuit of its agenda. And while I wouldn't want to comment on, as I said, specific threats, I'm absolutely satisfied that ISIL is a specific threat, has specific threats and would make specific threats to the UK as well. In terms of the issue of Europe, I've set out what I think is the right strategy for Britain, that is to renegotiate our relationship, to put that relationship to referendum and give the British people a proper choice between a reformed place in Europe and leaving the EU altogether. Of course, there are those in the Conservative Party who want to leave, and people who vote for the Conservative Party, as there are people who vote for the Labour Party, who want to leave the EU altogether. Some of them want to leave the EU altogether, irrespective of any renegotiation that I managed to complete. And indeed, before his defection, I was pretty confident that Douglas Carswell was one of those people. There was no renegotiation he wanted. He wanted the opportunity to vote to leave. And that is why I think his decision is slightly bizarre, because he fought as a Conservative in 2010 when we didn't have a commitment to an in-out referendum, but he's left the Conservative Party at a time when we do have a commitment to an in-out referendum. But that's a question for him to explain, perhaps, rather than me. But what is absolutely clear is, with me, what you get is a renegotiation to address those issues that most matter to Britain, to make sure we have a European Union where you can be in the single market but not in the single currency, to deliver those objectives. And then, come what may, whatever you think about this renegotiation, it will be the choice of the British people whether to stay in that reformed European Union or leave. And that will be the real choice at the next election. And indeed, voting for UKIP is really only likely to help deliver a Labour government that won't give you a renegotiation and won't give you a referendum. And I think those arguments will become very clear in the months ahead. But as I said, right now, the most important issue facing this country is the terrorist threat that we face. And the statement I've made today is very much in response to what JTAC have said. And I think it is important for people to hear directly from the Prime Minister, not about individual measures, important though they may well be, but actually to set out the overall comprehensive approach that we will take at home and abroad to tackle this threat. And I think it's very important, and I'm assisted by a National Security Council that for the first time looks at how our action and our work impacts us here at home as well as overseas, and I think that's vitally important. Thank you very much indeed.
We have a question for international media, sir.